I'm Ben Sidran, and I want to talk to you about what I have going on in 2015. I call this my literary year. And the reason I call it my literary year is because there are 4 specific projects that are coming out this year that all refer to my interest in philosophy, sociology, literature, and of course, jazz. You know, over the years, people have asked me, Ben, you do so many different things. You're a piano player and a songwriter and a producer, and you've done journalism. Who are you? Will the real Ben Sidran stand up? And what's so funny to me is I've never thought of them as separate things. I've really always thought of what I do as a form of journalism. Basically, I'm just reporting on my time and my place. I feel like a time traveler from the 60s. I was sent from the 60s into the future, from a time when we were really interested in these ideas. And 50 years on, I'm still sending these reports back from the battlefield. These are first-person notes on what I've observed. In a way, my literary year has taken 50 years. Blue Camus is my 30-something album. I don't even know how many there are at this point. And it's kind of a distillation of everything that came before it. You know, when I started recording, it was 1971. It was my first album. I had just come off of writing Space Cowboy with Steve Miller, and it was a world of pop music, and I really wasn't sure what I was able to contribute. And Blue Camus is kind of the maturation of that. The record before Blue Camus was called Don't Cry for No Hipster, and it was kind of a look back on this aesthetic from the 50s and the 60s, back to a time when we were in love with ideas, and we were in love with the idea that we could change the world and that writing mattered. And so who are these people now, 40 years later, and what's become of them? That's what that album was about. And this album, Blue Camus, I would say is the interior world of those hipsters, the kind of things that they thought about, the ideas of existentialism, for example, poetry, politics. Blue Camus has a song called Wake Me When It's Over, which is kind of my take on politics today, I'm sorry to say. And it's got a song called A is for Alligator, which is about the folly of believing that we can all cozy up in a capitalist world and be friends. You know, it's eat or be eaten. A Life in the Music, the true story of everything I ever knew, was written and published in 2003 after my heart attacked me, and I decided to look back and collect all the little crumbs that I had left as a trail in the woods behind me. I always thought, you know, I was so lucky to observe so much history. I mean, I came up out of the Paris metro in 1968 into the street riots, you know, and I've been backstage and on the road, so many interesting people, so many interesting times. I thought I wanted to write it down as a document for my family, if nothing else. Reading it, I took 6 months to read it because I couldn't read more than an hour at a time. It was really pretty emotional. I mean, I knew all the words and I knew what was going to happen, but hearing it in my own voice was very powerful. And so it took 20 visits into a recording studio. It's 20 hours long, and it's on audible.com. There Was a Fire, Jews, Music, and the American Dream is a book that took me 7 years to write. The first thing that happened is I taught the course at the University of Wisconsin as the artist in residence. And after I finished the course, I realized there was no textbook for this course. How was it possible that a group of immigrants, the Jews, who came from the Pale of Settlement, who never made up more than 2% of the population of the United States, were able to contribute 80% of the Great American Songbook? The 2% is a hard fact. The Jews have never been more populous than that. But the 80%, of course, is a statistic that I had to make up because nobody could know what the contribution was. But the fact remains that when you take into account the writers, the publishers, the musicians, the executives, the producers, the lawyers, the Jews over the course of the 20th century really invented this particular aspect of American popular culture, the popular music business. And these are the songs that we sang to ourselves as Americans as we grew up in the 20th century. And these are the dreams that we dreamed, the dreams of social justice, the dreams that caring about somebody really can change the world. A boy and a girl hold hands, and in that moment of caring, everything is possible and the future exists. That the American dream is a very Jewish thing. Well, talking jazz is one of my favorite artifacts from the jazz underground experience of my last 4 decades. You know, in the 80s, I was on National Public Radio in various guises. I was the host of Jazz Alive, I was a reporter for All Things Considered, and I had my own program, an interview program called Sidran on Record. And on Sidran on Record for 6 years, I did long interviews with over 110 musicians, including Miles Davis, Sonny Rollins, Betty Carter. These musicians at that time had never been allowed an hour to simply tell their story to the world. It's funny because now they're so iconic. You'd assume that they were iconic then, but you know, there really was a time before Thelonious Monk was on the cover of Time magazine when a lot of people were not interested in what Thelonious Monk had to say. Subsequently, there are not a lot of interviews out there. I've gone back to the original tapes, and there are now over 100 interviews with the men and the women who were pioneers in this great experiment. Sometimes it's called America's classical music. You can't really play any kind of music without playing Charlie Parker. So there you have it, the 4 artifacts that make up my literary year 2015.